so you can see. So, so what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the developmental stages as we move through. So what I'm going to do is we're going to start just from beginning, from 10 and under, and work all the way up through our adult populations. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we look for in training at each level and what we can expect from our players. So I want to start off first by asking you guys a question, because I get asked a lot of questions, and that'll be at the end. But I want to ask you guys a question. If I came to you and I said, I have a young child and I want them to start tennis, at what age can my child start tennis? Marcus, what do you think? What age can my child start tennis?
Any age.
Any age. So 2?
Yep.
2?
3.
3? 4? Do I hear 5? 5, 5, 5. I have a 4. Do I hear 5? I have a 5. Do I hear 5? Do I have a 6? Okay, so there's a little bit of, not disagreement, but people have different opinions. And one of the things that I look at, and when I was coaching and people would come and ask me that question, I would say, well, what I want is your child to be able to pay attention for 45 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour or whatever the length of the class is for the youngest group. And I want them to be able to follow directions for that amount of time. Okay? Some kids that's 3, some kids that's 4, some kids that's 5. Okay? And the analogy that I use is, you know, the drinking age is 21, but I know plenty of 40-year-olds that should never be allowed to touch alcohol. So there's a different part of the development. And as we go on through, we have a difference. We have a chronological age, and we have a training age, and we also have a maturing age. So obviously everyone matures at a different rate, and depending on how quickly they mature, they may start training. So how many of you guys have players who are maybe 10 years old, 11 years old, and are just starting to play tennis? Yeah. Okay? How many of you have kids that are 4, 5, 6 years old that are in your program? Okay, so by the time that kid that's 5 gets to be 11, they've been playing for 6 years. So they will probably be at a different stage on every level than the kid that comes to you as an 11-year-old and is just starting out. Okay, is that 11-year-old, is that 12-year-old going to be far behind? Is there hope for a kid that starts playing tennis when they're 12, other than just playing in high school? What do you think? Yeah, absolutely, right? Sure. How many of you? He's not here anymore, but how many of you guys know Jim Gray, that was in the area for a while? No one remembers Jim. He was up at Chattahoochee. Anyway, Jim played at Purdue. Jim played on the tour. He was a hitting partner for Jennifer Capriati in the early days. Still an excellent player. But Jim started tennis when he was 14. Okay, so he was very successful starting at a later age. So what age you are, there's a lot of other factors that play into it. Okay, so as we start, usually I have a clicker. It's a little bit more. So one of the buzzwords around my industry is sport-specific training. Okay, and honestly, people come to me to train for tennis because I have that background, and that's what I specialize in. And we do sport-specific training. But what exactly does sport-specific training mean? I think a lot of people think that it means simply mimicking exactly what you do in your sport and taking that into the gym. okay? But there's a lot more to it than that. Yes, we do a lot of sport-specific footwork patterns, okay? And one of the things for me, having spent 20 years as a high-performance coach, is I know what those patterns are. I know what the movement patterns required are to get out wide and hit an open stance forehand. I know what the footwork pattern is to drop step and take a ball coming hard and fast on your backhand. Okay? So when I work with the coaches of the players that I train, I can go to them and say, okay, what are you working on? I had a player a couple of years ago, and her coach said she can't open her stance on a hard ball to her backhand. He didn't have to explain anything else to me. So I was able to design sport-specific movements, sport-specific exercises that worked on that. Okay? But there's another side to sport-specific training, and it's going opposite. Okay? My first job is to keep my players healthy. My first job is to keep my players on the court, because if they're not on the court, they're not doing what they want to do. Last year, the facility that I'm the director of, Impact Sports, we expanded and built a new weight room, and we built a beautiful new treatment room. We had a small treatment room before. I have 3 athletic trainers on staff, but we built a larger room. It looks like a college, it's set up like a college training room. We have 3 open tables. We have a private room with another table. But my goal, and we do a lot of different modalities there, but my goal is to keep my players out of there, okay? I like to see them in the ice bath because I know that means that they've been working hard. But other than that, my goal is to keep them out of there. It's nice to have it though if I need it. So tennis players do this all day long. They internally rotate. So if they're on the court 2 hours in the morning, internally rotating the whole time. Internally rotating the whole time. Then they come back in the afternoon and they play 2 sets, 3 sets, another couple of hours. Same thing. Then they come to me for an hour, 75 minutes, hour and a half. And we spend most of that time taking medicine balls and throwing them around, simulating ground strokes. They're continuing to internally rotate. So they're doing the same thing again. And so what I need to do instead is I need to open them back up. I don't need them to come this way, I need them to come this way. So when you talk about sport-specific training, that involves a lot of prehab work, a lot of corrective work, a lot of working in opposite from what they normally do, okay? Basketball players, okay? They do a lot of pounding, a lot of up and down. Yes, they come into the gym and we work on their vertical, we work on their leg stream, but that's not the only thing that we do. There's a lot of other things that we have to work on with those guys to keep them healthy. Every time you jump, what do you do after you jump? You land. When do most injuries occur? On the jumping or on the landing? On the landing. When you serve, you accelerate up into it. Every acceleration is followed by what? Deceleration. You can only accelerate as well as you can then decelerate. And the decelerating, or the eccentric phase of it, is where injuries occur. I tore my rotator cuff in college, and it was interesting to me. I was in college a long time ago, back in the mid-'80s, and at that time there was a young phenom pitcher for the New York Mets named Dwight Gooden, and my orthopedic surgeon at Chapel Hill told me in 1985 that Dwight Gooden had a flaw in his follow-through. He said Dwight Gooden is going to have shoulder problems if he doesn't get that fixed. 2 years later, blown out shoulder. After that, I listened to my orthopedic. So a big part of sport-specific training is working on injury prevention. So it's not just doing the same thing. And a lot of that will include general athletic work. And this is a big part of what we do. We work on movement patterns. We work on being able to land properly. Not from a tennis perspective, but just from a general athletic base. Even the pros that I work with, they'll come in and they don't have much of an off season, but we'll spend a week doing a general prep phase. And then we'll do anything that's tennis specific. One of the guys that I work with from here, Jameer Jenkins, he's fallen into a thing we found in the last couple of years that what works best for him is he'll come in for a week and he won't hit a ball. He'll come into that first week and he'll do 2 sessions a day in the gym. And then the next week, he'll still do 2 sessions in the gym, but he'll do 1 session on the court. And then into the third week, he gets into his normal routine of 2 sessions a day on the court and 1 in the gym. But that first week, he does tire flips. He does just general stuff to get stronger, general stuff to work on his landings. And we're going to talk about some of the things that we do, especially with the younger kids, in just a minute. But general prep work is very important to what we do. So, starting with our 10 and unders and our 12 and unders. First thing that I want to talk about is, and this is something that I've found working with younger kids, but it also works, it works with everyone. But especially with the younger kids, we want to focus on external cues rather than internal cues. So if you give someone too much information and you create that paralysis by analysis, they're not going to be able to do the task very effectively. They're going to have too much going on in their head. It's kind of the idea of over-teaching. And especially for kids that are in that group, the 10 and unders, the kids that are in your Rogie programs, that's especially true. So we need to hold their attention a lot better. And we need them to just focus on the external rather than the internal. So, for example, instead of, if I have a kid and he's just doing a jump, instead of telling him that I want him to go down into a squat position, load his legs, and then come up into the air, reaching up with his hands, my focus will be push the floor away. Kids can understand, push the floor away. That's all they need, okay? They're working on, we'll give them a small medicine ball, and they're just gonna do a throwing motion, okay? Instead of telling them that they need to load from the back leg, transfer their weight to the left leg, rotate the hips, rotate the shoulders, and then come in this overhead motion, we'll give them a height target, throw it higher. We'll give them a distance target. Throw it to the service line. Good. Now throw it to the net. They'll start to get that motion. Okay? So external cues versus internal cues are a big part of what we'll do with our younger groups. ABCs. Some of you may have heard me talk about this before. Well, with the 10 and unders, the 12 and unders, we want to focus on the ABCs. Agility, balance, coordination. Okay? Agility, balance, and coordination. Okay, now I can see that. Agility. The greatest gains in agility are between the ages of 5 and 12. Every aspect that we will work on, agility, strength, power, cardiovascular, they all have different optimal windows. Some of them will be prepubescent, some of them will be postpubescent, some of them will be right after that puberty phase, that PHV. Some of them will be a little bit later. But we want to try to hit those optimal windows. And for agility, working on it with the younger kids, that's their best time. That's their best base. So first one, A, agility. B, balance. one of the first things that we'll do is simply stand on one foot, put your arms out, and hold it. How long can you hold that position? Okay? Now, we'll ask the kid to close their eyes. Take that position and close your eyes. And immediately, you'll start to see. An ideal for us is you should be able to hold that position for half as much time with your eyes closed that you can with your eyes open. And this is working on proprioceptive skills. Proprioceptive skills are understanding where your body is in space, understanding your surroundings. The example that I like to use is if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're in your room, you're in your home, you can find your way to the bathroom without bumping into things. You know where everything is. Okay? I woke up in a hotel this morning. I'm not really sure where I am. I have to kind of feel my way around. I'm probably going to turn the light on so I don't break my toe like I did a couple of years ago in Minneapolis. But proprioceptive skills are very important, and they go along with balance. Dwayne Wade, a couple of years ago, his trainer, if you watched the Heat play at all, Dwayne Wade in the early part of his career spent a lot of time on the floor. He was always getting knocked down. He was always falling down. And part of it was the nature of the way he played, but part of it was his proprioceptive skills weren't to the level of an NBA superstar. And that was something that his trainer, Tim Grohl, worked on to basically help him stay healthier. That was going to be the other knock on Dwayne, was he had a hard time staying healthy because he couldn't stay upright, he couldn't stay off the floor. So proprioceptive skills, and for kids, it's a great skill to learn because it goes hand in hand with some of our other spatial skills. Okay, being able to relate hand-eye coordination to the ball, being able to relate what I call foot-eye coordination. When I stopped coaching high performance, I coached high performance for 19 years, and after that, I worked here in Atlanta as a director of tennis at a country club. And the first thing that struck me was every club player is too close to the ball. I felt like I could put on a loop 2 things and just let it play all day. Too close to the ball, relax your grip. You know, everyone's got a death grip and everyone's in here. Okay? But that's that foot-eye coordination. And with kids, we develop that by set a ball down. Set a ball down at the tee, have the kids start at the service line, start at the baseline, run up and kick the ball. Look to see how they're able to get their foot placement in relation to the ball. Are they able to get next to it and kick? They've been playing soccer, they probably will. You know, do they overrun it and then it's behind them? Do they come up short and then they're reaching for it? Just a simple skill like that. And those are the types of skills that we want to start training in our players at this young age. That's the optimum window for them, and it's going to help them and help me as they get older, as they get to be 14 and 15. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But working on those proprioceptive skills, those balance skills, that's one of the bigger things that we work on. And a big part of that too is their receiving skills. What do you see with kids when they first start and the ball's kind of loopy and they run up to it and you're thinking, here it comes. Sure enough, it bounces right in front of them and then bounces up over their head. Okay, part of that is they don't have a point of reference. They haven't seen that before, and they'll start to say, okay, now I know I need to stay back. One of the games that we used to play with the kids was we would have them catch balls in a cone. And the first thing that most kids do when the ball comes and they want to catch it in the cone is they catch it like this. They run around like this, catching it up here. What's this teaching? This is teaching them that, oh, I want to contact the ball up here. So what we would do is we would make them hold and the other thing is that they're always reaching. They're here. So we took the cone and said you have to hold it with both hands and hold it at waist height. Okay? So now you have to move your feet to move into position to catch the ball in the optimal point. Now we're teaching them their contact point. We're teaching them this rather than this. We're teaching them how to be in position rather than always reaching. So the third one is coordination. Coordination. One of the first things that I see with kids is the ability to separate the arms and the legs. You have to be able to hold two different rhythms, two different ideas, upper body and lower body. You have two different things going on at the same time. Most kids will have a difficult time coordinating both together. Okay? The first step is having them do it at the same time, being able to coordinate opposite arm, opposite leg, opposite arm, opposite leg. Okay? Second would be having them do that different with their lower body than they're doing with their upper body. So we can start to talk about tennis rhythm. One of the things that I like to do is I'll put two cones down and I'll say, okay, you have to go through the cones in a figure 8. And you're going to go really quickly, short and fast with your feet, and you're going to go really big with your arms. So it looks like this. The feet are moving quickly, the arms are moving slowly. And it's that rhythm. And the reason that I have them do it in a figure 8 rather than just a straight line is what you'll see is as they start to get that concept and they're able to do this, they have to think about it though. So when they go to turn, it kind of stops. One stops, feet keep moving, the arms stop moving. And then once they make that turn, they'll start again. Okay? But that's just a natural progression. That's just a natural progression. Try that yourself. it's rubbing your stomach and patting your head at the same time. But those are the types of things that we want to see. But again, the rhythm for tennis is a little bit different. Okay? We will take a simple drill of tossing and catching. Okay? And with the younger kids, we'll just use a tennis ball. With the older kids, we might use a medicine ball. But what I want them to do is, I want them to catch and load at the same time. So they're learning a little bit of a different rhythm. And as you start, you can catch and let that loading foot land kind of at the same time. Once you get that, now I will adjust the height of the ball. Sometimes it'll be slower, sometimes and it's slower and a little bit higher. Sometimes it'll be a little bit faster and lower. So now they have to learn to come here. What happens as soon as you change the rhythm is they'll start to do this. And they go back to this where they're trying to catch it up here. Why? Because they're there. Okay, I'm here, so now I'm going to reach up here, as opposed to learning how to get into position and change the rhythm. Rhythm, of course, being one of the biggest factors for being able to generate power, being able to generate powerful ground strokes, powerful serves, coming from the rhythm. Last part about the coordination. Contralateral versus ipsilateral. Anybody know what that means? Contralateral is opposites. Ipsilateral is same side. Okay? Which do we do in tennis? Both. We do both. We do both. Okay? So if I'm hitting a neutral stance forehand, I'm hitting it off of my left leg, my right arm. Okay? Contralateral. If I hit an open stance or a semi-open stance, and I load with my right, and then transfer my weight to my left leg, right arm. I also do ipsilateral. I might load that right leg, hit, and finish on the right leg. So we work in both patterns, and we want to start working that at a young age. Again, being able to coordinate, doing different things. How many of you guys know how to juggle? Oh, come on, Pat, you gotta be kidding me. Every kid that I grew up playing tennis with knew how to juggle. Why? Because there are 3 balls around at some point, and you don't have anything better to do because you're waiting your turn, you're waiting for a court, you're waiting for the court to dry, and you just start, and you just learn, okay? And then you can start to, can you juggle? So you're juggling and running at the same time, okay? Doing those little things, those silly little things like that, really will help your young players. Teach your kids how to juggle. The one that I could never get, I could get the one where I could do it off the wall. I could never get the one off juggling off the ground. I couldn't do it. I still can't do it. So teaching your kid, just letting them do those little things really will pay benefit down the road. Okay? Because we're working on their coordination. So the physical skills and acquisition that you can see on the PowerPoint that we want to start to develop. One of the first ones that I want to see from our kids is running form. Running form. And it seems like such a basic movement. We work on running form. We do some of the same types of drills with our pro athletes. Okay? And people are kind of excuse me, people are kind of shocked sometimes when they see some of the drills that we have our pro athletes doing, just marching, marching with the sled. But we're working on shin angle, body angle, posture, things like that. And that's an important thing, but working with the younger kids just on their running form. The first thing that we want to have is hip flexion. We want them to be able to drive the knee up. Okay? So that simple basic motion, a lot of you'd be surprised how many kids can't do it. Okay? They don't have it here. So we will do some of the things that we will do will be wall drills, where they're on the wall and they're up in here, and we'll clap. You switch, clap twice, switch twice, clap 3 times, switch 3 times. Working on that leg drive, looking to see where that back leg is going to land. Those are the types of drills that we're going to do. One of the things that we want to see too in that motion is the toe up. Okay, we want to create that dorsiflexion of the toe being pulled towards the shin. We don't want to see this. Okay, how many of you guys do some of the plyo hurdle drills that I've shown you over the last few years? Okay, first thing that they want to see from the kids when they go over the plyo hurdles is that toe up. How many of them do this? And they look like that. And one of the ways that we'll train that is just like we were doing on the wall drill with the running, is stop there. When they're doing it, stop. It should look like this. Most of them will look like this. So toe up, getting into dorsiflexion so that we can generate the proper force coming back down. All of your running skills, whether it's acceleration, top end speed, speed endurance, as a tennis player, you will basically never reach top end speed because there's not enough room on the court. Okay? Usain Bolt reaches top end speed around 60 meters. His big thing is his top end speed, he's able to maintain it. He has incredible speed endurance. Most guys start to fall off after about 20 yards. So in that 60 to 80 yard window, 60 to 80 meter window, that's when guys are at top end speed. So you're not going to reach that on the tennis court. And we don't do a whole lot of training for top end speed, but all of our running drills will translate into a better athlete. I just heard this yesterday. A trainer told me that he looks at it like this. His job is to give the coach a better car. Doesn't matter if it's the tennis coach, basketball coach, football coach. He's going to give them a better car, and then it's their job to train the driver. Okay, that's my job. So all of these things that may not seem, well, how does that relate to tennis? But especially when you're talking about younger kids, it's going to create good general movement skills. So the toe up on running, upper arm swing. This goes back to coordinating here. Scott, which can you move faster, your legs or your arms? Your arms. Your arms. Your arms will dictate how quickly you can move your legs. So doing a nice seated arm swing. Okay? Developing that motion. Very important. We want to go 90-degree angle. We want to go from the eyes, sideline, to the hip. I like to have them focus more on the down motion, because as they do that, they put their anterior shoulder into stretch and it'll help pop back up. Okay? But creating this arm swing. Watch your kids, especially your younger ones. Watch how many kids run like this. Their upper arm doesn't move. It's stuck to the side. And you can see this angle changing. Okay, this is very inefficient. And one of the things that we're trying to do with just our general movement skills is become more efficient. More efficient, you'll be able to last longer. More efficient, you will stay injury-free. So working on that upper arm swing. See this a lot too, especially in tennis players. They're very tight up here. Okay, especially the girls. We roll forward and they'll be here. And it's these little choppy things. And by the way, I emphasize upper arm swing, because if you tell kids to move their arms, you see them and they're running like this, and you tell them to move their arms, they're going to do this. They're going to start to chop. Upper arm hasn't moved. That angle has changed. Okay, upper arm swing. I mentioned the wall drills. Being up against the wall. Another one that we will do is a falling start. A lot of what we work on with running form is creating proper angles. And right now we're just talking about it linear, but we also want to create we start with the linear, and that will help us create the proper angles, lateral and transverse. But we'll just do a falling start. So up onto the toes, fall, and then take off. The next extension of that, something that we don't do necessarily with the younger kids, but we have a bullet belt. So you're attached to a belt that has Velcro, and they will fall into it, create that optimum angle as they run out about 5 yards, driving the legs, then we can pop it and release them, and they take off. Like I said, that's something that we'll use with our older kids, but the basic of it is that falling start. We'll do that sometimes with a reaction drill. Let them start to fall forward and then drop and then run up and catch the ball. The last one on our running drills that I want to talk about is our cycling progressions. Okay. So the first thing that we want to do is what I call ankling. And it's simply cycling the feet, but only bringing them above the ankle. And so what they're starting to learn is how the heel pulls up and over. How the heel pulls up and over this way. Okay? So we can take that from ankling, and we can go to our butt kicks. And if you've seen me speak before, you know that I'm really picky about how we do our butt kicks. Most people will do them this way where the knees stay together. But what we want to do is we want the knees coming up and the heel coming straight up, rather than if my knee is in a fixed position, then my heel is actually moving in an arc. Okay? I want my heel to move more of a straight line. Well, the only way to do that, to get it straight through the floor up to my hip, is to pull it up, and my knees got to get out of the way. So when we do our butt kicks, we want to make sure that we're coming up here as well. The next one that we'll go into are our high knees. We'll go into our high knees, and then we'll go into butt kicks, say for 3 yards, high knees for 3 yards, and then sprint out from it. Why? When you run, you are essentially doing a butt kick, turning it into a high knee position, and then cycling back down. Okay? You are doing a butt kick into a high knee, and notice in that high knee position, toe up. I'm in this position, not here. And driving back down. How many of you guys have ever had ankle issues? Just sprained your ankle, turned it on the court, anything like that? Lots of tennis players obviously have had ankle problems. My left ankle is just nothing anymore. But if we are working on this running form and working on that toe up and working on that dorsiflexion, we're strengthening the ankles. We're preparing them for when the kids get older for more pounding. They're going to be set up properly for it. Second thing for the younger kids, throwing skills. Throwing skills. I mentioned using the external cues. One of the things that we want to see when our kids throw is the ability to use legs. Ability to use the legs. We all know, we've all said it, kinetic transfer, kinetic chain, starting from the ground up. Watch how many kids don't do that. And guess what happens when you don't use your legs? The hips don't turn. Okay? So just a simple throwing skill is teaching them how to use their legs. Again, it's teaching that contralateral move. Left foot forward, throwing to the right hand. Right foot forward, throwing with my left hand. Basic throwing skills. Okay? I know that a lot of it is down here, so we're teaching this. Again, as opposed to giving an internal cue of get your elbow up and reach, you just tell the kids, throw it higher. Here, let go higher. They'll get this easier than they will the biomechanics of it. What's wrong with this throw? What's wrong with this motion? What did I do wrong? What's missing?
Your left hand.
My left hand. Okay? Opposite arm. Opposite arm out for balance. What do we do when we serve? Opposite arm. What do we do when we hit a forehand? Opposite arm. These are basic skills that kids can learn from basic throwing motion. Opposite arm. Rotate the hips. Follow through. What do we do when we hit? We rotate the hips and we follow through. Okay? When we just learn to throw properly, we're rotating the hips and following through. Very few times will you see a kid do this. How many times do you see a kid do this on a serve and stop up here? Okay? General skill, general movement skill that is going to then translate to what they do on the court. Trunk rotation. You can also see this with the throwing when we start from here. Okay, but the trunk rotation, and also with the trunk rotation, we generally don't rotate the trunk this way. Okay, we rotate the trunk this way. What am I doing now? I'm loading and unloading. I'm loading one side and unloading to the other. Load one side, unload. Load, unload. exactly what they're going to do once they get on the court. Okay, front rotation. It also creates a pivot point. There are a lot of little different things that we can do. We do a lot of with the younger kids. We just do a lot of tossing and catching, things like that. Basic, okay. But now I can take a progression and say, all right, here's what I want you to do. We have these little very light. I hesitate to call them a medicine ball because that implies that it's heavier. But it's here, it's nice and soft. And we'll take it and say, okay, throw it. Throw it. What are they learning? They're learning returning. They're learning returning. Okay? Now I want you to catch it. So all you have to do is catch it. We work on things where they come over and they can catch on one leg. Now they're learning how to receive. Last progression, catch and throw it back. Okay? What are they learning now? Receiving and then returning. So that's our progression. Returning first, then receiving, and then receiving and returning. And again, just with that little trunk rotation, creating that pivot point. Are plyometrics appropriate for 10 and unders, 12 and unders? Yeah? Sure. In the right kind. There are all different types of plyometrics. Scott, again, what's an example of a plyometric exercise?
Simple one.
Let's just anything. What do you think of?
Jump over a cone.
Jump over a cone.
For little kids.
Little kid. Box jumps. You know, we all like to see the possibly real video of J.J. Watt doing a 52-inch box jump, whatever. Box jump, depth jump. Okay, standing on a box, jumping off of it, landing, jumping up onto another. Is that appropriate for a kid 10 years old? We have a Vertimax at our gym, hooked in with the bands, and we work on exploding up. We don't put the kids on that. We don't put a 9-year-old onto a Vertimax and give them a resisted jump, okay? But in the right way, kids can do plyometrics. Jumping rope is plyometric, okay? Probably a lot of you, the first plyometric you ever did was on the schoolyard, and you did play leapfrog. That, in and of itself, is a plyometric exercise. So we can start to implement those types of things into the younger kids. Skipping, nice power skip, okay? And you'd be surprised how many highly ranked players that are 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, I tell them to do a power bound, and they can't get that coordination, they can't get into head flexion, they can't extend up, they can't coordinate it all together. Why? They didn't do it when they were younger. They did too much sport specific. Scott mentioned the cones. We have little hurdles like this that we can jump over. So we're teaching landing as well. We'll make them hold that position, jump over it, and how do they land? We want them to start to land softly. Again, general movement skills. Okay, let's go to the 14 and unders. And what I want to talk about with these guys is the early specialization. And if you have a child, if you have a player that's age 11, how many hours a week should they be doing tennis? I'm not talking about adding the fitness. How many hours a week should those kids be doing? Per week. 2 hours a day? 8? 3 hours? 2 clinic? Just in general. Generally for what we would talk about, we talk about the kids that are playing tournaments. Kids that are, let's say they're 11, 12 years old, they're playing tournaments. So they're playing tournaments every other weekend, okay? So you figure they're gonna play at least 2 matches then, hopefully more, okay? Let's say they average 3 matches a tournament, okay? So average match, you're gonna say an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, especially at that younger age. That's why you put those guys on later in tournaments. Let's say they average an hour and a half for 3 matches. That's 4.5 hours. Let's just give it 5 hours on court for a tournament. Okay? Hour and a half clinic, maybe 3 times a week. We're up to 4.5 hours plus 5 hours on the court. That's 9. 9.5. Private lesson, 10.5. That's not bad. How many kids that are 11 and 12 years old are doing a clinic 4 days a week? Hour and a half, 2 hour clinic, 4 days a week, taking a private lesson, playing beyond that. Our basic guideline is the number of hours should be no more than their age. So an 11-year-old should not be on court more than 11 hours a week. A 12-year-old should not be on court more than 12 hours a week. If these kids are doing more than that, and trust me, in South Florida, I see a lot of them, okay? They are most likely not doing a lot of other sports. If you've got an 11-year-old who's on the court 16, 18, 20 hours a week on average, and they have schoolwork, and they have sleep, there's not a lot of time to be on the soccer team. There's not a lot of time to be playing basketball. There's not a lot of time to just be running around. Because most of those kids are also coming to me for an hour or 2 or 3 a week. Most of those kids are also spending time doing your fitness programs. So they are specializing at a younger and younger age. I had a girl come to me, a little Russian girl, she was 9 years old. Very, very good player. Won Little Mo Nationals. Homeschool, on the court, 4 hours a day. She was on the court. She was basically following the program schedule that a pro player would follow. She was doing 2 sessions a day, every day on the court. They wanted her to come into the gym 3 times a week and work with me. She couldn't do it. I put her in the gym, and anything that she did, she was so out of balance. Her old coach told me that they had taken her to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor told him that she had the worst back he had ever seen on a 9-year-old.
Wow.
Okay? So the kids that are specializing too soon are going to be susceptible to overuse injuries. They're going to come to me when they're 14, and they're going to be so out of whack, out of alignment, that I'm going to spend a lot of time regressing and trying to fix things rather than accelerating them and pushing them on to the next level, being able to work more on their strength, because now they're post-pubescent. Now we can work more onto their strength. Now we can work more onto their explosiveness. But I can't do that. I can't take a 14-year-old and do a lot of plyometrics when their squat looks like this, and their knees come together in valgus just with no weight. Okay? So they're susceptible to all these issues like that. I had a girl, she was 15, an Italian girl. She came in one day, and she said, she turned around and said, "Look at my shoulders." I said, "Yeah." And she was left-handed. She said, "See how my left shoulder is lower than my right shoulder?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "My coach said for you to fix that." I knew her coach pretty well. I said, "You go back and you tell Ian, I have 2 options to fix that. 1, you start playing right-handed. 2, you stop playing altogether." See the only way I can fix that. But for her age, she should not have been that far off. I have, in the last 6 months, I've had 2 kids come in. One of them's 11, and he's top 5 in the nation. One of them's 14, he's top 50 in the nation. And the issues that these kids have with tight hip flexors, one side dominant, the internal rotation off of the shoulder, it's amazing. Honestly, it's kind of sad. But that early specialization is what is going to create issues down the road. What else is going to happen to these kids that are on the court like a professional schedule? What's going to happen to them when they're 15, 16, 17? If they haven't already been taken out of the game by overuse injuries, they're going to burn out. You know? Kids are not little adults. I can't program them the same way I program an adult. I mean, how many of us try to take a vacation? We need to get away. You need time to, to decompress. Kids need more of that. So if we're specializing too soon, we're going to have kids that we're going to lose them. They're going to get to a certain point, a certain age, and they say, enough. There was a study that I read a few months ago, and it took guys that their career high ATP ranking was top 100. So we're talking the elite of the elite. And then it took guys whose career high ranking was 101 to 200, might have been 250. And they looked at what age did those guys start to specialize. And the higher ranked group, the guys that made it to the top of the top, not even the 98% guys, the guys that are 99.5% top, those guys specialize a full 13 months on average later than the other group. So let your kids go out and play other sports. I played football until the 7th grade, I played baseball until the 8th grade, and I played basketball until the 9th grade. At that point, I didn't have time anymore. But by that time, I was 14, 15 years old, and I had that other background. And quite honestly, the strength of my game was my athletic ability. Okay, I was a much better athlete than I was tennis player, which is probably why I didn't do that. With our 14-year-olds, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Okay, if we can take care of the kids when they're in the 10 and under, in the 12 and under, and give them these general movement skills, these general athletic skills, by the time they get to be 14, I don't have to regress and go back and try to fix things that are going to be time-consuming. Because to work on a kid who's running mechanics, different strength bands, so we would use those more for our pressing, our pulling. We don't do a whole lot of barbells with these guys. Honestly, we don't do it a lot with them. Well, I don't do that a lot in general with tennis players. We use more dumbbells. I'm very fortunate that the facility that I train in is state of the art. We have every toy that we could want, but one of the things that we have is a Kaiser wall, and it's compressed air, and it allows us to do things explosively, but with younger ages, even explosively, that you can do with the older groups in a safe way, because it's a compressed air rather than a cable or something like that. The other thing that we will look at when we get to the 14 and unders, now we will start to do more periodization. Okay, we'll sit down with them and look at their tournament schedule. Okay, when do you want to peak? What do you want to do? with tennis players, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, but with tennis players, it's very difficult because there's not really an off time. You know, kids are always doing something. Usually what I will do is coming up right now, right after nationals, that's that time that we'll kind of go back and we'll reassess, we'll look at the schedule coming up, and we'll look at what we need to work on with them, say from now to the end of the year, and put together their program. But that's the time, kind of end of August, 1st of September, that we might work on kind of our general prep work, which we don't get to do very often. But once they get to be into the 14s, that's when we start to add our periodization. A lot of the things that we'll do with the plyometrics with the 14s, that's when we can start to add more of the single leg work. The first thing that we'll work on when we do that is going to be a single leg jump into a double leg landing. Then we will work on a single leg jump. We'll work on the landing part. Again, we're working on the eccentric. So just simple drills where maybe they're on one leg and they land and they have to stabilize. There's a difference between stabilization and balance. Okay, balance is in your ears. Stabilization is more into your hips and your ankles. So we want to start to train that. We want these kids to be able to land properly and stabilize. That's also teaching them the proper angles that they're going to need. So when I see a kid and they're doing a simple hop like that, and they land, and they have to give that little second hop, I would rather see them do that than see them land and do this, okay? Because it's teaching them proper angles and how to get out of a bad position. So when that kid goes wide on their forehand and they're not quite able to land on a good angle, I don't want them to think that that is the way to gather themselves. I want them to know that it's okay to give that little extra hop and then a jab step and into a recovery. So that's kind of a key point to me. I think you'll see that a lot. Okay, I want you to stick the landing. And they'll, I did it, right, coach? Okay, I'd rather see him take that little extra hop and maintain the proper. When I talk about angles, I'm talking about shin position, hip position, things like that. Okay, I'd rather see them learn that, and if they have to give that little extra hop, then that's fine. Okay, with the 16s and 18s, these kids now, we will start to really look at their periodization and when we want them peaking. We will add more of the strength work, but with that, we will also add more of the prehab work. All of our programs have correctives built into it to help keep us balanced, to help keep us in good alignment, to keep us healthy. And we'll add a lot more of that. The reason that we'll add more now is that now these guys can do more, okay? They're pounding a lot more. Now we can kind of get into, most of these guys are going to be doing a lot of time on the court, a lot of time in the gym, a lot of tournament play. I mean, I get I work with a lot of international kids, so I work with a lot of ITF players, and I get them in for 4 weeks, and then they're gone and they're playing 4 ITFs in 4 different countries, you know, through South America or through Asia or through Europe. And, you know, we're talking about kids that are 16, 17 years old, and they're playing the equivalent of a pro schedule. They're on the road for 4 weeks. A lot of them will go just with their coach. They will be in contact with me, so I will be giving them workouts throughout. I don't send them just a plan because I don't know what's going to happen. You could lose first round. ITF, there is no backdraw. So those kids could lose just like on the tour. Those guys could lose first round. They could make it to the semifinals. They could play a 4-hour match on clay. They could play a 75-minute match on a hard court. So there's too many factors involved for me to just say, here's your program, I'll see you in a month. Okay? I have to be in constant contact with them through text and through email, getting them programs just like I do with our pro players. And with that periodization, with those guys, we do what's called undulating periodization, and it's very difficult, but it's what you have to do with tennis players. The only real exception with tennis players are college players. College players can go with what's called straight line periodization. Okay, so we'll start with their base. We're doing 3 sets of 12, and then we'll go into 4 sets of 8, and 6 sets of 5, and work down into a power phase. And we'll span that out over the amount of time that we have, whether it's 12 weeks or 16 weeks or something like that. But with tennis players, we don't get that tight. We have to do what's called undulating periodization. We have to pick our spots. We have to keep them off balance, for lack of a better word. So periodization with the 16s and 18s is a big deal, and also the prehab work that we do, because they're adding more time, they're adding more pounding. Really quickly, I just want to touch on a couple of things with our adult populations, and I'm going to talk about it not from the standpoint of the pros that I work with, but I'm going to say from 30 and up. Okay, so there's a proliferation on both tours, but especially on the men's tour now, of older players. Look at how many guys over the age of 30 are still playing at a really high level. Okay, and one of the biggest factors for those guys is obviously they take care of themselves physically. Okay, I know David Ferrer spends more time on the physical component now than he does on his technical component. He's just maintaining, he's managing his body. Federer has been fantastic at that. But when we talk about adults, people like me, old, the biggest thing is get your recovery work done. Our pros, our 16s and 18s, they all travel with what's called foam roller. Foam rolling is fantastic, okay? It lengthens everything out. Just a quick side note on foam rolling. If you're foam rolling your IT band from your hip to your knee, anybody do that? Anybody foam roll? You have a foam roll here on your IT band? How does it feel? It hurts, more so than here. I'm going to tell you why it hurts. Foam rolling is for soft tissue, but there's a cartilage that goes down here that encases that. And so what foam rolling does is it lengthens the muscle out. It takes those little bumps and that tightness and it spreads out. And it's like kneading dough, okay? But this, it's set. You're not going to be able to do it. That's why it hurts, and that's why it's not effective anyway. So stay away from the IT band with foam roller. A couple of the other things that we do is ART, active release technique, and MAT, muscle activation technique. Those are the types of modalities. Certainly sport massage, get everything back in order. Chiropractic work, whatever it is that you need to do to maintain your body. Okay, the warm up and then the recovery for adults is going to be huge. My goal is I'm going to try to take care of my body for the next 21 years until I turn 70, and then I'm going to start playing again. So my goal is I'm going to try to outlast all these guys. But getting your recovery methods, and you know what? Getting the ice back. If it's good enough for the pro, it's good, it works. It's not fun when you first get in, but it does work. All right. Really quickly, Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Okay. USTA used to have some agility tests they did.
Yes.
Certain protocols for those tests, things of that nature. Do you know if anything like that exists?
They still do like the hexagon test, the over and back.
Yeah. Do you have anything that you recommend along? There are 10 best. And then my next question is, if you had to pick the best sport to sort of counter the effects of what you think happened to a young developing tennis player, what would that sport be?
Well, if I had to pick a sport for younger players to counteract what they go on the tennis court, I hate to say it, but I'd probably say soccer. Just letting them run around, developing coordination, developing just those skills. Basketball, absolutely. Any of them are fine. Even baseball, football, any sport is fine. But if I had to pick the best one, I'd probably say soccer or basketball. Going back, if you go through, I think you can still find a lot of that in the sports science, but the hexagon test, the dot test. I'm not a big tester per se. I like to use the drill. Kids like to see the numbers sometimes, and you can't see a progression, you can't show it, but I prefer
what was
just.
valuable was they kept the data from those test
Right.
results for over 20 years.
Right, and what they showed where you should be, but what that doesn't take into account is what I was talking about from the beginning: chronological age versus training age. Yes.
So I have a problem teaching kids 10 order for the serve. Some I can see they're not developed.
Right.
So most of my kids are Asian, some are vegetarian. Is there any exercise, or I just wait for them to grow before?
Again, just working on that basic throwing skill. Sure, get some old rackets that you can just let them throw those, because what you're trying to do when you're serving is now you're having to coordinate a lot of different motions, getting the toss, getting this out of the way, getting this up, getting this loop, but without that having to hit it, but just throwing, they're developing that motion. It kind of goes to that progression of returning and then receiving and then receiving and then returning. I got one more question. The nutrition part, the question is how much do we talk about nutrition? And nutrition is a big part of what we will do. We're partnered with a nutritionist in Boca that we work with, that we will refer people to, especially in the state of Florida, but in a lot of states. I know that Georgia is one of them as well. There is a major crackdown on people dispensing nutritional advice that aren't licensed to do so. And you'd be surprised what would be considered nutritional advice. You know, even for me to tell you you should eat this, this, and this, that's technically not legal. But we talk to them a lot about it. We get them to it, and the biggest thing is we try to get them to understand that food is fuel. And if you're going to be an athlete, you have to be fueled properly. You know, and you have to have the right kind. You don't go out and take a Ferrari and put regular gas in it. Okay, that's the kind of thing. And the other thing that I do try to emphasize to them is the idea that you don't have to do it all the time. I mean, I eat pretty cleanly. My goal is 80 to 85%